how hard was it for you? I mean, especially you. You have kids, so I don't have kids yet. How hard was it for you to leave your 9 to 5?
So my 9 to 5 was really. I wish it was truly a 9 to 5, which sucks to say, but it never was a 9 to 5. Even though I say it, it was my day job, but I did live events all the time, and my days would literally fluctuate from like 6 a.m. to 10 p.m. Or I remember right before, so right like when I started the company, I was still working my 9 to 5 job. We'll say, it was a union job in the city, and I remember doing 4 a.m. train. Thank God I actually lived like 2 minutes away from the train station, so like if I overslept, like I was able to just
You
jump
were
in and go.
chilling.
Like I was like, oh my gosh. I mean, I learned to sleep on the train like a baby. Like it was an hour and a half ride in the morning. Nobody wanted to socialize. Like just leave me alone, let me sleep. I cuddled with my bag, and that
Who's
was
this
it.
guy
And
cuddling his bag on the train?
oh, it wasn't just me. It was my coworker. One of my coworkers. Once we got to know each other a little bit more, we used to do it. We literally looked for each other on the train platform. It was great, and it was just like, okay, well, night. Like we took like a 4-seater. I know you're not supposed to do that, but we ended up taking like a 4-seater, just put our bags on one, and then put our heads back on the other. It was
Crazy,
great.
crazy.
But trying to answer your question back, leaving it for me actually wasn't like I know what I
Mhm.
wanted to do, and I didn't know how I was going to do it, but I knew like what I wanted to do. And then actually COVID happened, and everything shut down here. You remember, I was right before you left. Actually, well,
The
you
COVID
only left for
blues.
I
say
said the
again.
COVID blues.
Oh, the COVID blues, yes. And them COVID blues. I remember them announcing it all. I was on the subway, and I remember hearing, "Oh, COVID's here," and I'm like, "I'm in the subway. If I got it,
Yeah,
I
like
got
there's
it.
nothing
Like
gonna
I don't
matter.
know what this stuff is." Nobody knew what it was. So I'm like, okay, whatever. And then, sure enough, the next day everybody stay home. That's it. And
That's crazy.
I'm like,
So,
dude,
so
like
was COVID like the
this,
deciding factor of like you really turning Tech Light into what it is today? Because you always did it on the side, right?
yeah. So it really turned into. I mean, it's been blessed since. I furloughed, and I was still on calls because we worked with a lot of the hospitals in
Mm.
the city, and they were like, "Hey, Deej, we need you to go out and." They were adding new zones, like because they had to quarantine people, do all this, new speakers, because they had all PA systems. They needed to have that in all
Yeah, in
the
case there's an
zones, all
emergency
these
or
new
whatever.
rooms.
Yeah.
And I'm like, listen, I have 3 kids. I had 3 kids at the time. I have 4 now. But he said, hey, listen, like, I'm not going. But I have no problem helping somebody who is willing to go. So I'll do tech support. Give them my phone number. I have my laptop. I can remote in, give them a laptop. I can remote into something if it's like some with audio processor or their
Mhm.
paging systems or things like that. A lot of it is computerized now to that extent. It's not so analog in the hospitals. And from that point, I was like, hey, listen, let's go. And I only had like a handful of calls, and the governor here shut completely everything down. Nobody moved. And I was getting phone calls during that shutdown period from a lot of clients that I had been reaching out to, and also some that I had just like literally just started a relationship with like a month
Mhm.
prior. Like during when everything was slowing down, I'm like, hey, listen, maybe I'll help them out. They weren't phased. They were still operating. So I'm like, they were doing everything like, 6 foot distance, masks, all that. And before everything was completely shut down. And once that shut down, I had one client who actually they rent a school, and the schools were too terrified to have them, so they lost a lot of their equipment. They lost a lot of access to it. So I had a whole setup here that I had been investing into over the years: lights, computers, video processors, things like that. And I said, hey, listen, let's do it. And I was learning as I went with it too, because I wanted to know, not that I didn't know it, but I knew enough to be like, let me get your needs, and then I can tack on like, hey, we need to do this now. We need to do this now. And it had just kept building. And I remember supporting them for months while shutdowns were going on, even through that summer of shutdowns. I actually ended up getting pulled back to that company briefly for like a month in the engineering department. We went through all that, and they ended up losing a lot of the contracts. I went off. They ended up letting me go. I ended up going off on my own, and I had 3 separate confirmations from my dad, who's now since then passed, my grandfather, and one of my friends. Thank you. He didn't die from COVID though, which is a shocker. But yeah, that's another topic we'll get into later. And I had 3 separate confirmations, dive full in. So I was like, you know what? And I had applied for other jobs during that low period. Nobody knew what that was like. When things started opening a little bit, it was like a sign of hope. And I wasn't getting any callbacks for anything, either due to shutdown or qualifications or whatever it was. I'm fully certified on a lot of things. And, you know, sure enough, that I was completely blessed, and I had client after client coming to me like, hey, I had leading people that were leading prior to COVID in video and live streaming and all these things, that they fell behind because they stopped investing, and then they poorly invested into some things that should have been invested otherwise. So then they were lagging. So again, I ended up creating a team out of it. Me and a couple other guys that were my techs. And some of them still actually work with us today. They just completely they're like, let's do it. Like whatever we need to do. So we got a lot of our clients have been churches, and I also have a lot of other not like secular, so businesses, not-for-profits, hotels, et cetera, that that over the years have reached out to us for help, and we've just been blessed that since then. Again, going through family situations, but blessed to be full-time in it. And my wife and I always say, whenever we're like, hey, we're not sure, should we keep going? And then God's like, oh, here's
here's
here,
something
we got a
else.
request form right here for you,
This
right
is
here.
what it's at.
And I'm like, oh,